Long shadows stretched across the empty exhibition space as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of Harper Gallery. I stood there, breathing in the familiar scent of old wood and oil paint, trying to process everything that had happened the day before. My name is Lily Harper, and yesterday I received what my family considered their biggest disappointment. The memory of the lawyer's office was still fresh in my mind, the ticking grandfather clock, the massive oak desk, and the expensive cologne my brother Daniel wore, filling the room with his self-importance. Daniel couldn't hide his smirk as Mr. Caldwell read our parents' will, which should have been a solemn occasion. Before we continue with today's story, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me keep sharing these inspiring tales that touch your day. Thank you for your support. To our son, Daniel Harper, we leave the sum of $50 million, our lakeside estate, and controlling interest in Harper Enterprises, Mr. Caldwell had stated in a dry, professional tone. To our daughter, Lily, we leave Harper Gallery and its contents. Daniel had actually laughed out loud. Finally, he'd said, "Dad always said you get exactly what you deserve, Lily." I could still picture him, his designer shoes, his perfectly tailored suit, the way he lounged in his chair as if he owned the space around him. In many ways, now he did. The gallery's been losing money for years, he'd added, examining his manicured nails. But hey, at least you'll have plenty of dust to keep you company. Maybe you can sell postcards to tourists. Daniel was right about the gallery's financial situation. Harper Gallery had been struggling for the past decade. Once Chicago's premier showcase for emerging artists, it had gradually declined into a barely sustainable business that serious collectors now ignored. But what Daniel didn't understand, what my parents never understood, was that I'd always seen something here that they couldn't see. I grew up in these halls, spending countless hours with my grandfather, Edward Harper, the gallery's founder. While my mother was busy planning Daniel's path to an MBA, and my father was grooming him for the family business, Grandpa Edward taught me about art. Not just the price tags and investment potential that obsessed my parents, but the true essence of each piece. "Lily, my dear," he would say, eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses, "remember that true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them." I could still hear those words as I walked through the main hall of the gallery. Even in its current state, the room was beautiful, high ceilings, classic crown molding, and tall windows that could let in floods of natural light when they were clean. But years of minimal upkeep had taken their toll. Half the track lighting had burned out, the walls cried out for fresh paint, and the hardwood floors needed refinishing. My footsteps echoed in the silence as I made my way to the back office. This had once been my grandfather's sanctuary, though my parents eventually converted it into a sterile storage area. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and everything was coated in dust, but I could still feel Grandpa Edward's presence underneath it all. I ran my fingers along his old desk, now relegated to a corner and covered with boxes, remembering the stories he used to tell me about the gallery's early days. How in the 1960s, he built it from nothing into a haven for artists who would later become legends. Rumors had circulated for years that he'd amassed an extraordinary private collection. But after his death 15 years ago, nothing significant was ever found. My parents, convinced that Grandpa Edward had hidden away masterpieces worth millions, had searched the gallery thoroughly. They brought in appraisers, hired experts, and even had the walls scanned for hidden chambers. All they found was the gallery's standard inventory, respectable pieces, but nothing exceptional. Eventually, they gave up. The gallery was abandoned to a kind of neglect, kept running only out of some lingering sense of duty to Grandpa Edward's memory, ultimately becoming a tax write-off. Instead, they focused on Harper Enterprises, grooming Daniel to carry on the real family legacy. Meanwhile, I worked my way through smaller museums and pursued my degree in art history. A sharp draft brought me back to the present. While lost in memories, night had fallen, and the gallery took on a different feel in the darkness. The few paintings still on display seemed to watch me with knowing eyes, and the sculptures cast strange shadows on the walls. I was about to leave when I noticed something odd, a small irregularity in the floorboards near Grandpa Edward's desk that I'd never spotted before. I knelt down and ran my hands over the wood. There was definitely a discrepancy in the pattern, a subtle anomaly that didn't seem to be the result of age, but rather intentional. My heart began to race as I recalled another of Grandpa Edward's favorite sayings: "The best hiding place is one that looks like it's trying to hide something else." For the next hour, I meticulously examined that section of the floor and the surrounding area. I was about to give up when my fingers found it, a small lever disguised as a knot in the wood. With trembling hands, I pulled it. The mechanism moved silently, perfectly engineered. A small section shifted aside, revealing a narrow gap beneath the floorboard. Inside was a leather-bound journal with yellowed pages and a single key that looked older than the gallery itself. I immediately recognized my grandfather's distinctive handwriting in the journal. But these notes weren't written in his usual flowing style. They were hurried, almost frantic, filled with calculations, sketches, and what appeared to be coded messages. On one page, boldly written at the top, were the words, "The True Collection, for Lily's Eyes Only." I turned the page with shaking hands, but before I could read further, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Time to discuss selling that dusty gallery of yours. I already have buyers interested in the building." I looked at the message, then back at the journal in my hands. Daniel had no idea what I just found, and I intended to keep it that way for now. I carefully returned the journal and key to their hiding place, making sure the floor panel was securely closed. As I left the gallery that evening, I felt different, transformed by the weight of my supposedly worthless inheritance into something like hope. My grandfather had left me more than a struggling gallery. He'd left me a mystery, and tomorrow I would begin uncovering what Grandpa Edward had kept hidden all these years. As I locked the gallery's front door, the key felt heavier in my fingers than ever. I looked up at the building's elegant facade, remembering Grandpa Edward's final words to me. "Patience, Lily. The best stories take time to unfold." He was right. This was only the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the gallery well before my 9 a.m. meeting with Daniel. I barely noticed the empty halls being painted golden by the morning sun. All I could think about was the hidden compartment and what lay inside. I knelt beside Grandpa Edward's old desk and triggered the hidden mechanism again. The key and journal felt weighty now, heavy with potential. I found a quiet corner and began to read. "My dearest Lily," the first page began. "If you're reading this, you've already proven you have the patience and perception I always saw in you. What I'm about to share must remain our secret. The true legacy of Harper Gallery isn't in its walls, but beneath them." As I turned the pages, my heart pounded. The journal told an incredible story spanning decades. Grandpa Edward hadn't just been running a gallery. He'd been part of a network of art preservationists working to protect masterpieces during troubled times. It seemed the gallery's basement had been used for more than storage. Several intricate diagrams showed a sophisticated network of hidden rooms beneath the main floor. According to the journal, Grandpa Edward had been secretly modifying the building's original foundation for years, creating a climate-controlled vault that no one else knew about. "The key," he wrote, "opens more than just a door. It opens a legacy I've spent my life building. But be careful, Lily. Others have searched for this collection, and not all of them have honorable intentions." I jumped at the sound of a sharp knock on the front door. Daniel stood outside, looking impatient. I quickly tucked the journal away and collected myself before letting him in. "Well, if it isn't the curator of dust," he said with a smug smile, brushing past me. "I brought some potential buyers. They're interested in converting this place into luxury condos." Two men in expensive suits stood behind him. They were clearly developers and immediately started discussing load-bearing walls and square footage, treating the gallery's history as an inconvenience to be erased. "The basement would make excellent parking," one of them remarked, looking at his tablet. "According to the original plans, it's mostly unused." A chill ran through me. What if they started excavating down there? "The gallery isn't for sale," I stated firmly. Daniel's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous, Lily. This place is worthless as an art gallery. You can barely pay the utilities." "No," I said. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know you had some sentimental attachment to Grandpa's little hobby, but it's time to grow up. Take the money and walk away." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Like you did? Taking millions while contributing nothing?" His face reddened. "I earned my inheritance by learning the business, not wasting time listening to an old man's fairy tales about art." "Get out," I said quietly but firmly. "All of you. You're making a mistake," Daniel warned as I showed them to the exit. "I'm trying to help you. I don't need your kind of help." After they left, I leaned against the wall, my heart racing. Daniel wasn't someone who gave up easily. I needed to work quickly. I returned to the journal and carefully studied the basement blueprints. According to Grandpa Edward's notes, the entrance to the vault was concealed in the northwest corner of the basement behind a false wall. The key, when used correctly, would trigger a mechanism. Taking a deep breath, I descended the stairs to the basement, It was just as I remembered, rows of metal shelving filled with decades of paperwork, old exhibition materials, and wrapped artworks and sculptures. But today I saw it differently. I made my way to the northwest corner as directed by the journal. The bare concrete walls met at a right angle and appeared solid at first glance. But when I ran my fingers across the surface, I noticed subtle irregularities in the pattern. What looked like a tiny crack in the concrete was exactly where the key fit. With trembling hands, I turned it in the sequence recorded in the journal. 1/4 turn left, 3/4 right, then all the way right. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it, a faint click, followed by the whisper of hidden machinery. Silently, the false wall swung inward, revealing a steel door with a sophisticated electronic keypad. The journal had prepared me for this, too. The code was created in a specific way, based on a crucial date, the day Grandpa Edward opened the gallery. I carefully typed the numbers, 196200315. The door opened with a soft hiss, climate-controlled air rushing over me. Motion-activated lights flickered on, illuminating a sight that took my breath away. The vault was enormous, much larger than it should have been. The walls were lined with rows of meticulously preserved paintings, each housed in a specially designed cabinet. Sculptures stood on pedestals, their forms casting elaborate shadows. Display cases held smaller items, rare manuscripts, ancient artifacts, and things I recognized from my art history courses but never expected to see in person. In the center of the room stood a simple desk with a letter placed precisely in the middle. With shaking hands, I opened it. Lily, my darling. In the true Harper Gallery, you'll find complete documentation for every piece in the vault, including its provenance, history, and most importantly, its rightful owners. Some of these works were entrusted to me for safekeeping during difficult times. Others were rescued from those who would have destroyed them for political or financial gain. What you see around you is the culmination of a lifetime's work, not just mine, but the efforts of countless others who believed in preserving beauty and history. This collection exists not to be sold or displayed for prestige, but to be protected until the right time comes for each piece to return home. I've chosen you for this responsibility because you understand that art isn't about status or price tags. It's about preserving the thread of human creativity that connects us all. There's a smaller room at the back of the vault. That collection is different, pieces I've legally acquired over the years, meticulously authenticated and documented. Those are yours to do with as you please. They should provide more than enough funds to keep the gallery and the vault operating as intended. Be cautious, be patient, and above all, be true to the responsibility you've been given. With all my love, Grandpa Edward. For hours, I explored the vault in awe. The collection included works by masters I'd only read about, pieces thought lost to time, and others whose existence had only been rumored. In the private collection Grandpa Edward had mentioned, I found hundreds of carefully selected works by artists whose values had skyrocketed over the years. By conservative estimates, they were worth well over $100 million. But it wasn't the money that brought tears to my eyes. It was the trust my grandfather had placed in me, the legacy he had quietly prepared for me all those years ago. My reverie was broken by a notification on my phone. Several missed calls from Daniel and a text message. This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake. I smiled as I surveyed the precious collection that my brother would have sold without a second thought. For the first time since inheriting the gallery, I knew exactly what direction to take. I made my way back upstairs and carefully secured the vault. There was work to be done. The gallery needed renovation. Security needed upgrading. And I had a legacy to uphold. Daniel was right about one thing. This was far from over. But he had no idea what he was truly up against. I was now the custodian of something far more valuable than money could buy. Thank you, Grandpa Edward, I whispered, looking up at the gallery walls. I won't let you down. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity. I hired contractors to restore the gallery's original features, making them sign strict confidentiality agreements. The basement was marked as undergoing environmental assessment and remained strictly off-limits to keep curious eyes away. At night, I pored over Grandpa Edward's journal, learning the stories behind each item in the vault. Some had been saved from Nazi looting during World War II, others from more recent conflicts. Every piece came with extensive files documenting its original owners and the circumstances that led to my grandfather acquiring it. But Daniel kept his word and wasn't giving up easily. First came the legal threats, a hefty letter from his attorneys demanding an immediate sale, arguing that the gallery's deteriorating condition constituted negligent handling of family property. I passed it to my own lawyer, an expert in art law whom I'd quietly retained using funds from selling a single small piece from my grandfather's private collection. Then came the financial pressure. Using his connections, Daniel interfered with the gallery's utility services, insurance, and even property tax assessment. Each time, I countered his moves using resources he didn't know I possessed. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday morning. When I arrived at the gallery, Daniel was waiting with two unfamiliar men. "These gentlemen are from the Chicago Historical Society," he said with a razor-sharp smile. "They're very interested in examining the building's original foundation. Apparently, there are concerns about structural integrity." The way they carried themselves and the slight bulges under their jackets made it immediately clear to me that they weren't from any historical society. At best, they were private investigators. At worst, something more sinister. "The gallery is closed for renovations," I stated firmly. "Any inspections need to be scheduled through proper channels." One of the men stepped forward. "We have authorization to leave," I interrupted. "Or I'll call the actual authorities." After they'd gone, Daniel lingered. "What are you hiding, Lily?" he demanded. "There's something in this building worth protecting, isn't there? Something Grandpa Edward left behind." "The only thing I'm protecting is this gallery's future," I responded. "Why can't you accept that?" His face grew serious. "Because I know you. You were always his favorite, always listening to his stories. He must have told you something. The clue was in plain sight, Daniel. You just never cared enough to look." That evening, I realized I needed to accelerate my plans. Daniel was growing desperate, and desperate people make dangerous decisions. I spent hours meticulously documenting everything in the vault. Then I made 3 phone calls to the world's leading expert on art repatriation, to a contact at Interpol, and to an old friend at the FBI's art crime team. 2 days later, Daniel made his move. I was working late when I heard the basement door open. The security cameras showed 3 men in dark clothing heading downstairs. Daniel wasn't with them, but I knew exactly who had sent them. I calmly pressed the silent alarm, a custom system I'd installed that connected directly to law enforcement rather than the gallery's standard security. Then I went down to the basement. The men were already at the northwest corner, using specialized equipment to examine the wall. They barely glanced at me when I walked in. "Looking for something?" I asked. "Lady, just walk away," one growled. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually," I said with a smile, "it concerns me very much. So do the federal agents who just surrounded the building." As if on cue, voices erupted from above. "FBI. This is a federal art crimes investigation. Everyone, remain where you are." What followed was a blur of activity. The would-be thieves were taken into custody. Daniel was located through their phones and picked up at his home. The search warrants revealed everything: his plans for the gallery, the hired men, and even his connections to certain unscrupulous collectors who dealt in stolen art. But the real surprise came the following morning. I had arranged a special meeting at the gallery. Present were officials from several governments, representatives from museums and cultural institutions worldwide. Together, we descended into the vault. As the lights revealed the collection, their gasps echoed off the walls. Museum directors embraced as long-lost masterpieces were rediscovered. Tears were shed as artifacts thought destroyed were found perfectly preserved. I shared everything Grandpa Edward had left: his meticulous documentation, the records, and the stories of how each item had come into his care. Over the next year, we would work together to return each piece of art to its rightful place, bringing the gallery worldwide recognition not for what it owned, but for what it gave back. Daniel, having lost both his freedom and his reputation through his own greed, watched it all unfold from behind bars. The evidence found in his home had linked him to other art trafficking operations, and he would have plenty of time to contemplate his choices. As for the gallery itself, I used a portion of Grandpa Edward's personal collection to establish a foundation dedicated to protecting and preserving art during times of conflict. The gallery became a center for activism and education, teaching future generations about the importance of cultural heritage. 1 year after discovering the vault, I stood in the newly renovated main hall. The original architectural details had been restored to their former glory, and light flooded the space. A special exhibition was about to open, not of priceless masterpieces, but of works by emerging local artists, just as Grandpa Edward had done when he first founded the gallery. In my office, once Grandpa Edward's sanctuary, I keep 2 items on my desk. The first is his journal, a reminder of the legacy he left me. The second is a small news article from the day of Daniel's conviction, a reminder that true value lies in what you choose to preserve, not what you can take. The gallery still bears the Harper name, but it stands for something different now. Not just a family tradition, but a commitment to preserving art for future generations. Every day as I walk these halls, I feel Grandpa Edward's presence. He would be proud, I'm sure of it. Sometimes, in the quiet of the gallery late at night, I think about how I nearly gave up and let Daniel turn this place into just another luxury development when I first discovered that hidden compartment in the floor. But Grandpa Edward had taught me well. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden from view, and some things are worth far more than their market value. There's nothing in the vault beneath the gallery anymore. Its contents have been returned to their rightful homes around the world, but the space remains ready should it ever be needed again, a hidden chamber prepared to protect the next historical treasure that needs safeguarding. And occasionally, I share Grandpa Edward's favorite quote with young artists who visit the gallery, their eyes bright with the same passion I once saw in his. True value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them. They never realize I'm talking about more than just art. The gallery, which everyone thought worthless, turned out to be valuable not because of what it contained, but because of its legacy of preservation, protection, and the understanding that some things are worth more than all the money in the world. Daniel may have gotten the money from our parents' estate, but I received something far more valuable, a purpose, a mission, and the chance to prove that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but doing right. The Harper Gallery stands tall in the heart of Chicago, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. No longer the rundown, dusty place my brother mocked, it serves as a beacon of hope, a guardian of culture, and proof that true value often goes far beyond appearances. And me? I'm no longer Lily Harper, the disappointment who got the worthless bequest. I am the keeper of a multi-generational legacy, the guardian of a tradition that values preservation over profit, and the proof that sometimes, if you know where to look, the greatest things in life can be found covered in dust.